everyone, and welcome to the Sincere Lifestyle.
Today I'm doing a DIY tutorial on how to make this face mask. I'm following along with instructions provided by CNN, which is based on the guidance from the Vanderbilt University Medical Center and Fort Howard and Medical College of Wisconsin. For more details, check the link in the description box.
The CDC is now recommending everyone to wear face masks in public, but a lot of them are sold out. So this is a great way to create one.
So we are creating this mask today that you saw on Karen. And what I use is a silk outer layer, a silk lining as well, which is great on the skin, and I use a tight woven cotton inside as the inner layer and also as the straps here. So in order to make this, we're going to create a pattern for the mask that will allow us to cut these fabrics. It's very easy, and the pattern is 9 inches long and 6 inches wide. So this is a pattern I originally made, so let's make one together. If you do not have pattern paper, you can also use any type of printing paper or line paper. This is just so you can cut the fabric super easy. So I am going to make this 9 inches long, and this is going to be 6 inches wide. So right here I'm going to measure 6 inches with a little dot here along my 9-inch long mark, and this is going to help me trace a very straight line so the pattern is a perfect rectangle. Okay, and now I'm going to connect the dots down here. Okay, and remember this is the perfect 9-inch long, so I'm going to follow that along in order to make the rectangle. Okay, so here's our pattern, which is 9 inches long, 6 inches wide, and now we are going to use this to cut the fabric. So as I said, I'm using 3 layers of fabric, and I am going to layer them and cut them using this pattern. Sometimes I like to trim this along the edge, just so you can see a little more clearly when you're cutting the fabric, that you're making sure that you're cutting it properly. At this point, it doesn't matter in terms of which layer is which. You're just cutting the 3 fabrics that you're using for your mask all together, and we'll layer them properly when it's time to sew. Here is my tightly woven cotton that I'll be using as the inside layer. This is my outer layer here. You can just lay it any method that works for now because we're just cutting it. And here is my silk lining layer. Now we are laying the 3 fabrics down. Make sure these are pressed. It's hard to use wrinkled fabric because when you cut them, it might not just be as precise as you would like. So what I'm using right now are just standard pins that you can get online. I'll include a link to all of my materials below, just in case you need some. And we are just going to pin this around inside the box. Make sure you pin it inside the box so when you cut, the pins don't trip up the scissors. Try to make sure you're pinning in a scoop motion in order to grab 3 layers of fabric. So scoop it up, scoop it down, then scoop it up. And you're going to repeat this for each side. And now we are ready to cut all 3 layers of fabric. These are my favorite scissors. I've always used them since my fashion school days, I'll include a link below to these. And now we have all the pieces of our main mask. So I'm just going to take this and set this aside. Our next step is to work on the straps. I am measuring right on this here and marking it right on this fabric. The reason why I'm doing that is you'll see how we finish this. The markings won't show at the end because these are going to be clean finished. So my ruler here is already 2 inches wide. So because we're making this 2 inches tall and 16 inches wide, I already have the 2 inches here. I'll include a link to this because this makes it super easy. But what we're going to do is we're going to keep on going since we have 4 straps and measuring it 2 inches by 16. Here we go. We're going to connect the dots on the side. And then we're going to connect the dots on the other side. And so we can cut these out straight away. And now we're basically going to iron these in order for it to be a strap. So for each strap, we are basically going to fold one end by 1/4 inch and iron that flat. That's going to allow it to have a clean finish at the strap end. Then we're going to fold the entire length in half and iron that flat. And then we're going to fold each side in to itself and iron that flat. And now we're doing it on the other side, folding that in. At the very end, you can fold the entire thing so it's just in place. And there you have it, your strap that you're going to sew down in place. So here are the 4 straps, and what I like to do to help you while you're sewing is to put a pin so this finished edge stays in place. And I like to start by sewing on this end, just so the clean finish looks as neat as possible. So I'm going to do that to each of the 4 straps. Where we folded it, that's our clean finish end. So I am putting this pin there just to keep it in place. So we are going to sew the strips a 1/4 inch away from this folded edge here that's open, and we're going to start with the clean finish edge just to make sure that that is as clean as possible. Sometimes there's little threads that pop up, and I like to just clip them along the way. I'll include a link to this cute little tool in my description box. So we are going to start by sewing this a 1/4 inch away from the end, and that's the end that opens like that. And we're going to start at the finished edge that we pinned, just to keep it in place. I always like to do a back tack at the beginning, just to secure it. So we're sewing the entire length a 1/4 inch away from that open edge. I always like to back tack it at the end, just to secure it. I always like to cut the excess threads along the way. I'll include a link to my special clipper. And you repeat that for each and every one of the straps, cutting any excess threads along the way, just to make it super neat. Now we're going to move on to sewing the pieces of the silk and cotton, which is the main body of the mask. So we're going to just start by unpinning the pattern piece from the 3 strips of fabric. So now we can just save this pattern for the future mask that we're going to make. You do not have to recreate this, just save it. We are going to start by laying the center layer of the mask right side up, which is our cotton layer. Then we're going to lay the very top layer of the mask, which you see when it's worn, on top of that with the right side up. When right side up means just the face of the fabric. So that is going to be right side up towards you. From here, we're going to pin the straps in place. So we're going to lay the strips down, 2 on each side, and we're going to do the clean finish edge is basically on the outer side, and the one that's open like this is going to be the one we're pinning towards the edge of the mask. So we're going to put it here with that open edge that's not clean finished at the edge of the mask, and we're going to put it a 1/2 inch down from the long edge, a 1/2 inch down. Just make sure that's accurate. So you have your inside layer, your outside layer that's facing you, and pinning this to the outside layer. The lining is not involved yet. So we did that on one of the 6-inch sides, and we're going to do that on the other 6-inch side. Taking the open end and pinning it 1/2 inch down. So now we are going to lay the lining where the right side is down. However, we want to make sure when we're sewing the ends of this, these straps do not get in the way. So before we do that, we are just going to pin these straps at the center just so it's out the way when we sew. Now that all the straps are out of the way of the sew line, we are going to place this lining with the right side laying down, which is away from you. So this is the right side here that we would see on when we place the face mask on our face. So that's the right side of the lining. Be sure to meet the ends, and what we're going to do is pin around the perimeter and leave an opening to turn the mask inside out after we sew the perimeter. So I'm keeping in mind my opening is going to be here, and it's going to be about 2.5 inches. Remember the scoop method to make sure you're pinning all 3 layers. So now what we're going to do is we're going to sew along the ends 1/4 inch away from the edge, leaving that 2.5 inch opening. So we're going to start by sewing that perimeter, and remember it's 1/4 inch away from the edge, and it's always good to start and end with a back tack just so you can secure the opening. So stop when you get about 1/4 inch away from the edge, lift up the presser foot while the needle is still in, and twist. And then place the presser foot down, and you're able to sew the next side 1/4 inch away from the edge. Now here is the side that has the 2 straps. When I get over the strap, I'm going to back tack it in order to keep the straps in place and make it extra secure. So I'm continuing the back tacking for each and every strap. That's about 1/4 inch away from the edge, so I'm going to lift up the presser foot, pivot, and sew the other side. Okay, so we're going to do that whole pivot thing 1/4 inch away from the other edge. And this is the edge with the straps, so we're going to continue to back tack once we press past the strap. Now we're going to do that pivot again, and remembering that this is the opening, so we do not want to sew the entire edge. We're going to just leave about a 2.5 inch opening on this side. Remember to back tack just to secure that. And now you can just cut out the excess threads. So now we're going to begin by taking the pins off. And we are going to snip the corners just to make it a little more smooth. And now we can turn it inside out. Now remember to remove the pins that you held the straps in place. And also to remove these pins at the center. For the corners that are a little puffy, I have this little tool. I'll include a link to it if you don't happen to have it. It's a great tool to make these a little more straight. And if you have a little pen, you can also use that. So now we're ready to iron. Remember, there's about a 2.5 inch hole, so it's always great to fold this inside so it has the same just smoothness of this, because that's what you're going to be sewing at the end. And remember, you can always cut these excess threads that appear as you go along, so at the end you get a clean finished product. Now we're going to pin the pleats in place along the 6-inch edge where the straps are. And we're just going to start by marking where the pleats will be with our pins. So from the very top edge of the 6-inch side, what we're going to do is measure 1.5 inches away from this top edge and place a pin just to note where that is. And then we're going to measure 2 inches from that top edge and place a pin to note where that is. And we're going to repeat this for 3 inches from the top edge, 3.5, 4.5 inches from the top edge, and 5 inches from the top edge. What we're going to do is take that first pin and meet it with the second pin, and so that would be your first pleat. So I'm going to take that little marker out and then pin that in place. We're going to repeat that for the second pin placement. Take that first pin right there at the middle, meet it with that second pin, remove that inside pin out, and then just pin that in place. And now for this last pin placement, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to meet that top pin with the bottom pin, take that inside pin out, and we can just pin that in place. So now all of your pleats on one side are pinned in place. Now on the other side, we're going to do the same exact thing. And now you have pleats on both sides, and what I like to do is just iron this so it's easier for sewing. So now we're going to iron all of these pleats in place. I like to stretch out the pleat just so you can get it really in place, and you can iron right over that pin, that's fine. This is just to help you with sewing so that you can have it all in place. And now we are going to sew around the entire perimeter, and that's going to close our 2.5-inch gap here, and it's going to secure our pleats in place. So what I like to do is just to pin this opening in place right before I sew it, just so it can be sewn at the appropriate area. We are going to start sewing this at the side that has that opening, and so we're going to sew it 1/4 inch away from the edge, and then we're going to pivot like we did before. So let's begin. So we are going to just back tack before we pivot, and pivot right there at that corner about 1/4 inch away from the edge, and then sew. The pleats are facing me, and so we're going to sew this way because it makes it easier to sew over all of this fabric. So back tack, and then pivot 1/4 inch away, putting the presser foot up. I usually like to pivot with my needle down, so make sure you do that. And let's begin. We're going to back tack about 1/4 inch away from this corner. And we're going to stop sewing it here. I would not like to continue on this side because the pleats would be not facing me and it's harder to sew that way. So you'll get more of a clean finish if you just lift it up and switch the direction in which you're sewing for that last side. Now I placed this last side so the pleats are facing me. And we're going to sew that 1/4 inch away from the edge again. And now we're just going to cut off the excess thread, and we are going to take out the pins. So we just finished up the sewing machine. We are going to take off these pins that we used to place these pleats, and also that we used to place the 2.5 opening. And now what we're going to do is just a final press that will allow it to look clean.
it's a vital product.
For all of you who don't have a sewing machine or materials available, I am including a link in the description box where you can purchase these at sinceregaston.com.
Thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe and see you next time.
Hit the subscribe button and press like on the video. See you next time.